Think about one of the most famous, popular facial scrubs you can buy at the drugstore. You probably know exactly the one I'm talking about. Millions of people use it every single week. A few years ago, this specific type of product was at the center of a massive public controversy and intense legal scrutiny. The main concern? Whether the abrasive scrubbing particles in the formula, which were marketed as gentle enough for everyday use, were actually creating microscopic tears in the skin's surface. While the legal dust from those controversies may have settled, that scrub is still sitting on shelves today, and the marketing still claims it is gentle. But over the years, the dermatological discussions warning against harsh physical scrubbing have only grown louder. Today, we are going to look closely at 3 popular exfoliating products that rely on these physical mechanisms. We'll explore whether they might actually be compromising the very skin barrier they claim to be refining. And then, I'll show you 3 alternative formulas that exfoliate effectively without a single rough particle ever touching your face. But before we name the products, we need to talk about why the beauty industry loves selling you physical scrubs and the crucial difference between the 2 main types of exfoliation. Physical exfoliation uses grains, crushed shells or textured surfaces to manually scrape dead skin cells away. Chemical exfoliation, on the other hand, uses gentle acids or enzymes to simply dissolve the bonds holding those dead cells together, allowing them to shed naturally without any mechanical force. Here's the catch. Physical exfoliation feels incredibly satisfying in the moment. You get that gritty texture, the immediate temporary smoothness, and the psychological feeling that you just scrubbed all the bad stuff away. The beauty industry heavily pushes these products because that instant sensory experience makes you feel like your money was well spent. Chemical exfoliation often feels like absolutely nothing. You apply it, you leave it, and the real results appear gradually over hours and days. But what is actually happening to your skin at a microscopic level during that satisfying physical scrub is a completely different story, and it's rarely something brands want to put on the label. Stay with me until the end, because I am going to share a chemical exfoliant alternative that costs under $12 and offers a much more elegant, science-backed approach to skin texture than any of the harsh scrubs on today's list. To truly grasp why this is so important, we have to look closely at what your skin actually looks like on a microscopic level. It is not just a flat, uniform layer of dead cells waiting to be scrubbed off. Under magnification, your skin's outer surface is actually a highly complex, interlocking structure. It is held together by lipid molecules, the exact same ceramide-based system we discussed in our cleanser video. This structure isn't random. It is meticulously organized to provide maximum barrier function, while allowing dead cells to shed off through a natural, controlled enzymatic process. The issue with rubbing physical particles across your face is that they don't possess a built-in sensor. They don't selectively target only the dead cells that are ready to fall off. Instead, they create widespread friction across the entire surface, aggressively dragging against cells that are not yet ready to shed, and pulling at those delicate lipid connections. When independent microscopy studies have examined skin after physical exfoliation, especially using irregularly shaped particles like crushed walnut shells, apricot kernels, sugar, or salt, the findings are often concerning. They frequently show microscopic disruptions ranging from minor separations in the cell layer to actual micro tears. And those tears can become direct entry points for bacteria and irritants. The severity of this disruption typically comes down to 2 things: how jagged the particle is, and how hard you scrub. Even with perfectly round, synthetic beads, which are now banned in many places due to environmental reasons, the pressure consumers naturally apply to feel the product working, can still cause friction-based disruption at that crucial cell junction. Chemical exfoliation approaches this process completely differently. Alpha hydroxy acids like glycolic or lactic acid work by temporarily lowering the pH at the skin's surface. This pH shift activates your skin's own enzymes, which then gently dissolve the protein bonds holding those dead cells together. The cells detach naturally without any mechanical force, without tearing the cells beneath them, and without compromising the lipid barrier. Beta-hydroxy acids, like salicylic acid, take it a step further. Because they are oil-soluble, they can actually penetrate into the pore lining to dissolve dead cell buildup and congestion from the inside out. With these acids, nothing abrasive ever touches your skin. You aren't creating microtears. Yet, they are frequently supported by published clinical evidence demonstrating improvements in texture, pore appearance, and radiance that many physical scrubs simply struggle to safely replicate. So, why are physical scrubs still so incredibly popular? It really comes down to human psychology. A massive portion of the physical scrub market thrives on the fact that the sensory experience of scrubbing simply feels like something is working. Chemical exfoliants, by contrast, can be a harder sell. Applying a liquid that feels like absolutely nothing and waiting for results to appear gradually over a few days doesn't trigger that immediate sensory gratification. In the world of physical scrubs, the feeling is the marketing. But when we look closely at the research, the science clearly belongs to the acids. So let's start with the elephant in the skincare aisle. Our first product is arguably one of the most recognizable physical scrubs in drugstore history, the St. Ives Apricot Scrub. For over 40 years, this iconic orange tube has been heavily marketed with comforting, wholesome language. You'll see phrases like gentle on skin, naturally derived, and exfoliates for smoother skin. But in 2016, this exact marketing became the center of a highly publicized class action lawsuit against the brand's parent company, Unilever. The lawsuit alleged that the product's marketing was directly contradicted by what the scrub might actually be doing to the skin at a microscopic level. The plaintiffs pointed specifically to the primary scrubbing agent in the formula, ground walnut shell particles. When you look at crushed walnut shells under a microscope, they don't look like smooth, gentle spheres. They have highly irregular, jagged edges. The lawsuit claimed that rubbing these jagged edges across your face could create micro-lacerations or microscopic cuts during normal use, making the word gentle highly misleading. Now, it is very important to note that this specific lawsuit was ultimately dismissed by a judge. But while the legal battle ended, the public conversation and the dermatological debate it sparked never really went away. Independent cosmetic chemists and skincare professionals have consistently pointed out that irregular natural particles like crushed walnut shells, apricot kernels, sugar, or sea salt can be incredibly harsh. Because of their unpredictable, jagged shapes, they create uneven, aggressive contact angles when forcefully rubbed against your skin barrier. There is a fascinating irony here. The natural, wholesome imagery that made this product so famous, the idea of using fresh apricots and walnuts, that whole cozy, kitchen ingredient aesthetic, is essentially the exact opposite of the chaotic friction happening at the cellular level. At around $5 for 6 ounces, this isn't a luxury product, but because it is so incredibly affordable and widely available, it is easily one of the most purchased physical exfoliants in the world. And that means millions of consumers might be subjecting their delicate facial skin to this kind of unpredictable, jagged friction every single week, all while trusting the comforting, gentle language printed right on the front of the tube. Now, you might be thinking, well, that is just a cheap drugstore scrub. Surely the expensive professional brands have figured this out. That brings us to our second product, which sits comfortably at the high end of the market with a strong professional salon heritage. Dermatologica Daily Microfoliant A, around 75 for 2.6 ounces, which breaks down to roughly $29 per ounce. This product commands a premium price that strongly implies a superior formulation. But I want to look very closely at two specific words in its name: daily and microfoliant. Let's start with daily. As we discussed, your skin's natural cell renewal cycle operates on roughly a 28-day timeline. Most dermatological guidelines for the average skin type lean toward chemical exfoliation maybe 2 to 3 times a week, certainly not daily physical friction. Scrubbing your face every single day runs the risk of removing cells before they are actually ready to shed, constantly stressing the barrier without giving it adequate time to recover. While Dermalogica heavily markets this as a daily step, there isn't a widespread dermatological consensus that daily physical exfoliation produces better long-term outcomes than periodic use. However, encouraging a consumer to use a $75 product every single day certainly ensures that the bottle will empty much faster. Then there is the micro in microfoliant. It is a brilliant marketing word. It implies a level of gentleness and clinical precision that standard drugstore scrubs don't have. This formula relies on rice bran powder as its physical exfoliant. And yes, rice bran is undoubtedly finer than crushed walnut shells, but under a microscope, fine particles can still have irregular shapes. Shrinking a jagged particle down to a micro size doesn't magically change how it interacts with your delicate lipid barrier. It just creates smaller friction. But it is still friction. What makes this formula even more frustrating is that it actually includes a legitimate chemical exfoliant, salicylic acid. But if you watched our video on niacinamide serums, you probably know exactly what I'm about to say. The concentration of that salicylic acid is completely undisclosed. We have no way of knowing how much of the heavy lifting is being done by the chemical acid versus the physical rice bran. So at 29 an ounce, Dermalogica is charging a premium that implies they have solved the inherent problems of physical exfoliation. Yet the microscopy of physical particles tells a different story. They hide the percentage of their true chemical active, and they encourage a daily scrubbing habit that many dermatologists would suggest is simply too much for the average face to handle. And that brings us to the third product on our list. This one perfectly illustrates one of the most effective illusions in the skincare industry, the clean beauty trap. Let's look at the Tarte Maracuja Exfoliating Cleanser. At around $30 for a little over 3 ounces, this product leans heavily into the narrative of natural, fruit-derived gentleness. Its consumer base is specifically drawn to it because of this clean positioning, assuming that natural ingredients inherently mean better, safer skincare. The formula proudly markets maracuja oil, sugar, and papaya enzymes. Now, maracuja oil is essentially the hero ingredient of Tarte's broader product line. It is a lovely antioxidant, but putting it in a wash-off scrub feels much more like a branding decision to match their other products, rather than an ingredient actually doing any exfoliating work. The actual exfoliation here relies on 2 things, the sugar and the papaya enzymes. And this is where the natural marketing story gets incredibly contradictory. Let's look at the sugar. Raw sugar crystals used as a physical scrub have the exact same fundamental problem as crushed walnut shells. They are highly irregular and jagged. But sugar has an added layer of unpredictability. It dissolves as you rub it. So, with every second you wash your face, the size and sharpness of the crystal changes. Sometimes it is intact and scratching. Sometimes it is partially dissolved. The natural origin of sugar doesn't magically make its jagged, unpredictable geometry any kinder to your delicate skin surface. Then we have the papaya enzyme. This is actually a brilliant, scientifically interesting ingredient. Enzymes can gently dissolve the protein bonds between dead skin cells, much like a chemical acid, but incredibly gently and without any physical scraping. If Tarte had just relied on this enzyme as the primary exfoliating mechanism, this could have been a beautifully gentle product. But instead, they combined it with those jagged sugar crystals. When a consumer buys this product for its natural, gentle positioning, they are likely drawn to that beautiful fruit enzyme story. But the reality is, any gentle enzymatic work is immediately undermined by the unpredictable physical friction happening at the exact same time. It is a frustrating formulation contradiction, giving you physical disruption right alongside enzymatic care. And it's a dynamic that the clean beauty marketing completely glosses over. So if physical scrubs are potentially causing all this unseen microscopic chaos, what should we be doing instead? Here are 3 chemical exfoliants that deliver on the promise of smoother, clearer skin without relying on a single abrasive particle. First up is essentially the gold standard for anyone dealing with congested pores, blackheads, or oily skin. Paula's Choice Skin Perfecting 2% BHA Liquid Exfoliant. Coming in at around $30 for 4 ounces, this formula uses salicylic acid at a clearly disclosed 2% concentration. Because salicylic acid is oil-soluble, it doesn't just sit on top of your face. It actually penetrates into the pore lining itself, dissolving the buildup that causes blackheads from the inside out. You aren't clearing the pore by force from the outside. You are clearing it from within. Research on 2% salicylic acid frequently points to significant, visible reductions in pore size over time. With this product, you get a clinically validated exfoliant, complete transparency on the label, and absolutely no jagged particles dragging across your skin barrier. If your primary focus is skin texture, radiance, and surface renewal, the Ordinary Glycolic Acid 7% toning solution is a perfect example of budget-friendly transparency. At under $12, this formula relies on an alpha-hydroxy acid. As we discussed in the science section, a 7% glycolic acid works at the surface level, temporarily shifting the pH to help your skin naturally dissolve the bonds holding dead cells together. The concentration is printed right there on the front of the bottle, and the formula includes aloe vera and amino acids to help support the skin during the process. At this price point, you're getting a measurable chemical exfoliant at a price that reflects standard production costs, rather than heavy marketing markups. It achieves the smooth texture that physical scrubs try to force, but without the abrasive friction. Finally, if you are completely new to chemical exfoliation or have slightly more reactive skin, a great mid-tier option is the Pixi Glow Tonic, priced around $29 for 3.4 ounces. This formula uses 5% glycolic acid, because that concentration sits a bit lower than the ordinary's 7%. It is frequently recommended by skincare professionals as a fantastic stepping stone for beginners transitioning away from physical scrubs. It allows your skin to gradually adjust to acid exfoliation with a potentially lower risk of irritation. Formulated with aloe vera, ginseng, and witch hazel for additional support, it sits at the exact same price point as some of those aggressive physical scrubs we just talked about. But instead of ground-up shells or melting sugar crystals, you get a clearly disclosed, gentle percentage of acid that encourages natural cell turnover without the microscopic mechanical stress. So, let's quickly recap what we've uncovered today. We looked at the St. Ives Apricot scrub, one of the most widely purchased physical exfoliants globally, which faced intense legal scrutiny over claims that its jagged walnut shell particles cause microlacerations. While that specific lawsuit was ultimately dismissed, the product remains on shelves, heavily marketed as gentle, despite the ongoing dermatological concerns regarding physical friction. We saw how Dermalogica charges a premium for a micro-exfoliant, yet relies on rice bran particles that still cause surface friction, hides its salicylic acid concentration, and encourages a daily scrubbing habit that many experts advise against. And we examined Tarte, charging a clean beauty premium for unpredictable sugar crystals that actively undermine the gentle work of the papaya enzymes sitting right next to them in the formula. On the flip side, we saw how Paula's Choice delivers a completely transparent 2% salicylic acid formula backed by published research on pore reduction, without a single jagged particle. The Ordinary offers a straightforward, effective 7% glycolic acid for under $12. And Pixi Glow Tonic provides a gentle 5% glycolic option that has been a staple dermatologist recommendation for over a decade. The takeaway here is simple. Put down the scrub and pick up the acid. That immediate smoothness you have been trying to achieve by aggressively rubbing particles against your face is readily available in a simple liquid that you apply. Leave on and let work. No unpredictable friction, no potential micro tears, and no unnecessary barrier disruption. The mechanism is vastly gentler. The long-term results are generally much more consistent. And in many cases, the price is significantly lower. Make sure to subscribe because next week, we are pulling back the curtain on the massive collagen supplement industry. We will look at the science behind the hype and explore the very real possibility that the expensive powder you are stirring into your morning coffee might never actually reach your skin at all. I'll see you then.